welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit. I'm Marianne. As usual, I am your host. I work with nonprofit leaders to master the art of influence so they can ask for and receive anything they want and need. And I'm especially excited today because I have an old friend, a dear, I'm going to say old because that's just the only way to describe it, Tom.
Yeah,
This
long time friend,
longtime colleagues, Tom
still young
Ruwitch.
guy, right?
Yes, always, forever. I mean, hey, I was at the AFP conference last week and people were like, Marianne just doesn't get older. I'm like, yeah, that's right, baby. Okay, so I have known you for a long time, and I know
Mhm.
you because in 2001, you were the first person I knew who did email marketing services, Marketfold, and that's how we met. And then I feel like we were kind of on the same path because in 2019 you sold Marketvote and you founded Story Power Marketing. And your coaches, authors, and other experts hire you to power up their stories because, and I love this, most dish out the same old boring content.
Mm.
True story that turns off prospects and then they get frustrated and stuck. So you help them transform content from ignored to adored. That's some mic drop language, and turn marketing from frustrating to fun and convert results from subpar to superb. Look at your wordsmithing.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
that's what I do. I'm a
Me
wordsmith.
too. I love words.
Yeah,
And so that's how we met many years ago because I worked at 501 Creative and
right.
we did branding and marketing design for nonprofits, and we referred each other back and forth. We had a lot of the same clients, and I remember the concept of email marketing, and you're like, oh my gosh, you can just send these out and it doesn't cost anything. And you're like,
Yeah,
what? I mean, I remember specifically, like, I think it was the AFP conference. Like, I think you were talking, and this is huge.
yeah,
It is huge. So before we get into storytelling, I kind of want to just ask you, like, what do you
yeah.
feel like the state of email marketing is right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And first, Marianne, really happy to be here with you. Yeah, we go back a long way. I've always felt we see eye to eye,
Yeah.
and so I think this is going to be a great conversation. And back in 2001, when I started the company, I had people saying to me, "Email marketing, that'll never work," and then right, and then not very long after I started the company in 2001, I started having people tell me, "Oh, email marketing is dying, or email marketing is dead." The social media is the new thing, and then SMS and text marketing is the new thing, and then a new social platform comes along, and email marketing is really dead this time. And then, fill in the blank, shiny
Right.
new
Whatever
object
new
in
thing, right.
technology. Email marketing is dead. So, what's the state of email marketing today? Well, lots of people will tell you that email marketing is dead or email marketing is not working as well, and got to be on TikTok or Instagram or wherever it may be. Email marketing is working as well as ever. And some people will say to me, "Oh, well, what about the young folks?" Well, I have twin children, 26 years old, and yeah, when they were in college and buzzing around and having fun and so forth, they were on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and so forth. And now they have jobs, and now they have email. And you can't sign up for whatever it is you want to sign up for. A streaming channel, Netflix, whatever, without an email. And they check their email now. We all spend time inside of our email, and we all welcome email from people who are sending us content that is relevant and entertaining and informative. Now, there's a whole lot of email that bugs us that we didn't ask for, spam, that is boring, and we'll tune out and move on. But if you run a business and you are delivering powerful content that's both informative and entertaining, your followers will tune in, they'll turn on, you'll stand out as the expert in your field, and they'll choose you and hire you. is, if you're a coach, consultant, expert, professional service provider in that
Right.
space, they'll choose you and hire you. If you're a nonprofit, they'll feel more connected to you. They'll connect their heart to your cause and be more likely to volunteer or to donate. Email marketing is still as effective as it ever was. And for those who say, well, social media is free and I need to use social media, I love telling the story of a social media influencer who has 35,000 followers on LinkedIn and teaches people how to build followings on LinkedIn and how to build a brand on LinkedIn. And she notes that 3% of her sales into coaching programs, of her books and so forth, 3% of her sales come from direct links in social media. That's
Hmm.
it. What she uses social media for is to build that following and then get people to the what she calls the real estate she controls. And what she means
Exactly.
by that,
Yep.
her email list. She runs an online community, a self-contained online community. And so email is real estate you control. You control the message, you control. There's no algorithm that says, well, I think we'll only show your email to 6% of the people today because, whatever. When you post on social, yeah, people see it. Yes, you have a following, but in the end, email marketing still works beautifully.
It does. I call
Yeah.
that reliable reach, right? I
Yeah.
want to get people
Reliable
off
reach.
of social and onto my email list where they're part of my community now. They're part of my
Mhm.
orbit. I mean, if you look at, Stray Rescue of St. Louis, this was last year before Giving Tuesday. Their Facebook page, which has more than 200,000 followers, got pulled for community guideline standards. And it's because they were showing pictures of hurt animals.
Mhm.
Um, and which they're very open about that's part of their mission,
Sure.
part of how they work. And so they had no Facebook page on Forgiving Tuesday, and it's like you can lose your stuff. I
Right.
mean, it could just and there's nobody to talk to. No,
Right.
like nobody, there's nobody on the other side of this that cares at all about what's going on. And they wound up having to create another page, and it took them like at least 6 months to get their page back.
Yep.
My LinkedIn got hacked. I got hacked and somebody took over my whole LinkedIn
Mhm.
profile and changed everything on it. And I finally got it back. But I could have lost, like 10 years of
Right.
contacts.
Right.
And it was just gone. I'm like, I don't want to start again. But I finally got it back. So yeah, I love email. As you know, I work very hard to give really good content to people. That's part of my operation. When I'm a value to you, you'll be a value to me, right? I don't
Right.
I don't worry about selling or pitching. I just am a value. And that's what I look at every time I send an email. Is this a value? Is this right? Is this a story worth telling?
Yeah.
And that's what I want to get into. But before I do, I realized I got so excited because, to get into this conversation, I start with the first question that I missed, which is tell me something you're proud of that you don't get to brag about a lot.
Oh, I just did. My twins. I'm proud of my twins. 26 years old. My son Jake is a commercial salmon fisherman in Alaska. He goes up to the Bristol
What?
Bay area of
Wow.
Southwest Alaska every summer and catches the sockeye salmon that you see in your grocery store. If it's sockeye salmon, also sometimes called red salmon, wild caught sockeye salmon, chances are it was caught in the Bristol Bay of Alaska. 80 to 90% of all the sockeye salmon caught on the
Wow.
planet is caught in this one location where my son Jacob fishes. My daughter Madeline is living in Philadelphia right now, studying to get a master's in biology and to be an environmental educator. And I just couldn't be more proud of them.
Oh,
They graduated college in 2019 and went straight into COVID times. And that's a hard thing for
yeah.
young people to do. And they both have gotten through that as all of us have. And they're doing great. Yeah, I'm real proud of,
Congratulations.
I'm a proud papa.
That's awesome.
And
Okay.
if you sign up for my mailing list, Maddie and Jake make appearances in my emails. I was just telling somebody earlier today the story, which is in one of my emails. about the time that Jake, who also is a master fly fisherman and works as a fishing guide, he and I went fishing together, and I taught him how to fish. And he caught 37 fish, and I caught 2 fish. And I share that story in an email, and there's a lesson in that I tie back to business lessons and so
Yeah,
forth. But
yeah.
my kids are characters in my emails.
There's good stories all around us,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So tell me what makes, because one of the things you said is the same old boring content that turns off prospects,
yeah.
and then they feel frustrated and stuck. So what's the same old boring content? What are we doing wrong?
Well, I'll give you an example of one. Executive coach. I work with an executive coach who works with business owners or senior executives who want to have less stress and want to have more freedom and leisure time. They don't want to feel like the weight of the world is on their shoulders and so forth. So that's the promise of what she does. So one of the ways or one of the lessons or services that she delivers to achieve that promise is delegation. She teaches these business owners how to delegate more effectively. And so she wrote a blog post about delegation before she hired us. And the blog post was something like, delegation is one of the most important business skills that any business leader can master. To delegate properly, here are 5 very important tips. Blah, 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 blah. And the thing that happens, especially with people whose stock and trade is their expertise. This applies also to nonprofits. So we're a nonprofit in the education sector. And what we want to do is talk about all of the challenges in education and all of the issues and all of the headwinds and the reasons that we exist and so forth. And so here is an issue or here is an idea, and I really need to give you the important information in a very serious and professional tone. I'm a financial planner, and I'm now going to tell you the difference between the Roth IRA and the traditional IRA. Blah, 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 blah. And no one cares, and no one tunes in, and no one pays attention because all of that information, all of that expertise that they're spouting isn't presented in a way that evokes the promise, that evokes the story. So when we're talking about a story, we're not talking about me. I'm going to tell you all about the ditch that I crawled out of or the garage where I invented my widget. It's not all about you and your story. It's all about your prospect, your audience, your client, your follower, your donor, and their story. What is their emotional journey? So when we went to work for this executive coach, what we began to do is say, okay, delegation, great lesson. Okay. The promise of getting them off the hamster wheel and all of that, you've got that part nailed, but now let's tell a story that really gets at that promise, at that journey. And we began to go in search of the right anecdote. And she had one right in her lap. She had a client. She told me the story. She had a client who owned a business and in 20 years of running this business had never taken a vacation longer than a long weekend, a Friday to Monday long weekend.
Oh
20
my.
years running a business, never had gone on vacation. And so what happened was, with her help, he did go away. And with her help, it wasn't a case where all hell broke loose and all bad things happened. And, he worried that, I'll share with you sort of the rough outline of the email and blog post. The subject line was how a stressed out owner let go and got away. Now, that in and of itself, compare that to something like 5 tips to delegate better.
Right.
It's like, all right, 5 tips to delegate better. So what? But how a stressed out owner let go and got away, that in and of itself is a little story, or it hints at a story. It's a journey, the journey from stressed out to letting go, the journey from stuck in the business to getting away. And the photo that went with that story was a guy on a hammock at a beach overlooking the ocean at sunset.
Right.
Okay. So her target audience is the stressed out owner who wants to let go and get away. So already they see themselves in just the subject line and just the picture, and off they go into the story. I know a business owner who has run the business for 20 years and hasn't gone on vacation longer than a long weekend in 20 years. And I forget if the words, sound familiar were in the story, but there's an implied, hey, sound familiar? And the reader is leading in and saying, wow, I can relate. And it may not be that person's not been on vacation in 20 years, but maybe they work every Saturday, or maybe they're coming home at 8 p.m. at night instead of 5 p.m. and they're missing their kid's game. Any of those conditions, they're relating to the story. And, he worried that if he went on vacation, everybody at the company would call and say, boss, we need help with such and such. And all of this was in the story. And it's all evoking the emotional journey. I have a framework that I use for discovering the promise, or for finding the promise and the core lesson. And it's called the 3E framework. First E is empathize. What are they feeling? Where are they now? What's keeping them up at night? What's frustrating them? Okay. Stuck, frustrated, worried that everything falls on his shoulders. Envision is the second E. Where do they want to go? What's the other side of the mountain? A beach, on a hammock, free, not worrying about the business, returning home with the business running beautifully. So if you know those first two E's, by empathizing and envisioning, by getting into the emotional experience of your prospect, you have the framework to hang a story. And the third E is, well, how do you enable that journey? How do you enable that journey? And the way you enable the journey in this particular case is you teach that owner how to delegate.
Right.
And so those 3 E's together are talking about the promise and then the lesson that delivers on the promise. That is the powerful story, as opposed to, I'm just going to talk to you about delegating and why how to delegate more effectively. And they don't see themselves in that. They aren't thinking, I woke up this morning and the first thing I wanted to do was
problem. They're not right.
Yeah. And so the question you asked was, what do I mean by blah, blah, blah? Great example of that is, here's some information that you need to know that I'm going to teach you, and I'm going to share with you my expertise. So much content is like that. And by the way, there was a lot of it before. There's even more of it now, because you can press a button and ask a robot to write you a blog post about 5 tips to delegate more effectively, and it's going to write it in 5 seconds. And it's overloading the internet.
Right.
If you can stand out by telling that story, that the reader or the listener, because this can be video, this could be audio, it could be whatever format you want. If the audience person leans in and says, wow, you get me, you're telling my story, or you're telling the story I want to live, then the next thing they're going to do is say, well, how do you do it? And they're asking you for that 3E. Tell me, how are you going to enable that journey where I'm going to go from stuck in my business to sitting on a hammock overlooking the ocean at sunset? I'll tell you how. By delegating. And I have 5 tips I can share with you about how to delegate. Now they're listening. Yeah.
So there's a concept I use called the medicine and the cure. And so the medicine is like, people will swallow any medicine if the cure is strong enough. So basically, in this instance, the cure is, like the cure is a vision of a relaxed, time away. That's the vision. What's the medicine? The delegation. But they're not ready for the medicine because they're not bought into the cure. So that's what I see. Like, I want to bring it to the nonprofit level, because that's what I see. People that are talking about medicine. We're so great. Here's what we do, blah, blah, blah. But we want to talk about the cure. Like, I wanted to, because I really want to translate your story just a little bit, because I can hear people in my head saying, but what about, donors or donor prospects? Because what they want is to see like instead of saying we're this, it's like, I know you are a person that cares deeply about animals in our community.
Right.
Right. And and your vision is like, and I know it hurts you to see what's happening. It's about them, right? Tapping into their empathy for a cause instead of, hey, we're doing this and we're doing that. Like,
Right.
that's the biggest shift you can make, is stop talking about like that, the medicine, because nobody cares. Like, they
Yeah.
don't really like it's like they don't really care how you do it. They just want to know what vision are we creating, right?
Right.
Together, what are we creating? That's
Right.
for me the biggest thing.
Yeah. And in your work, and I know you do this with your clients, it's about understanding down to the individual donor. What are the emotional triggers and the emotional concerns for this person? It might, I'm associated with a nonprofit that provides scholarships and grants to help people who otherwise might not be able to go to college and to go to, through, and beyond. And so for some, it's a civic concern. I want to lift people in the community because I believe my community depends on this. For others, it might be rooted in feelings about social justice, and there are different reasons. And so what you are doing is understanding, what are the feelings, and where I, a donor, I want to make a difference in this way. And when you speak to them and connect with the emotions that they're feeling and the desires that they have, they see themselves in the cause, and now it makes sense. Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to donate to a scholarship fund. But people don't wake up saying I must donate to a scholarship fund unless they have been connected to the core,
Yeah.
the reason.
I think one of the things that you do, because I've been reading your emails, one of the things I work on too is to create stories, just from like, to take everyday experiences and tell lessons from them.
Yeah.
So I am obsessed right now with this thing on TikTok, and it's called Second Date Update. And like, somebody gets a first date, but they can't get a second date. And they call into this radio station and they're like, man, I thought it was awesome. I don't know. And then they bring in the other person like, it was a train wreck, and like, blah, blah, blah. And they and they see it. So anyway, I went down this rabbit hole, and I was thinking, like, wow, like this one guy, like, he took a diabetic to an ice cream place, and then she's like, I really can't eat. He's like, oh, it's no big deal. Can't you just do 10 minutes on the treadmill? Like,
Right.
I just think, oh my God, the whole world needs a like, oh my gosh. It's like, aren't you trying to get this person? What couldn't you just say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I
Yeah.
didn't understand. To teach me, like, no, has to double down on their stance every time they don't get the
Yeah.
second date. And what I was listening to that, I'm thinking, okay, so then I relate that to the first gift and the second gift, right?
Right.
Like, what is the communication breakdown? What are you not, right? Like, because none of those people on the first date thought anything went wrong,
Right.
right? But every person on the every other person who was on the date was like, no, it did not work for me, because
Hmm.
they weren't tapping into what their needs were.
Donor
Like, your only
needs,
job,
and
right? I
right.
say this a
Yeah.
hundred times, like, people will buy to the level they feel seen and heard. My only job is to get people to feel seen and heard. I don't have to pitch anything, sell anything, convince you. So how
Right.
can I feel seen and heard? And like, it just cracked me up. So I made a little email about, right, like, what are you
Yeah.
missing? What, and if and it does take, empathy is not a skill that we teach, that, obviously, because, and like, so how, like, and if you're interested, I can teach you how to do that, right? Like, so,
Right.
but I'm not just saying, hey, I'm telling a story, but it's something that just came in my, it was just something that, like, I came across and thought, oh, how can I relate this, so
Yeah.
thinking about like driving to work, like thinking about like, um maybe, right now everybody's getting ready for college,
Hmm.
and in your case, in the organization that you're invested in, you can tell a story about, hey, I never got to have that experience,
Right. Right.
or that, um maybe if somebody really wanted to go and they're seeing everybody do it and they're not able to do it, like you can tap into a lot of just the things that are out in the world. And it's not about selling a program, it's just
Yeah,
about connecting people to what's already in their hearts.
that's exactly right. Yeah, I love that story. And literally immediately after we record this episode, I am hosting a live masterclass called How to let me try to remember the name, How to Generate a Flood of Client Attracting Content Ideas. And so the promise of that session is, the emotional journey is, you're tired of sitting in front of a blank screen stuck, you're frustrated with writer's block, you want to be more methodical and comfortable in coming up with content ideas for social and email and so forth. And in the emails where I promoted that, I told stories that evoked that journey from stuck to free and so forth. And so the lesson will be a series of tips and pointers and so forth to help them get there. What you did reflects exactly what I'm going to talk about. The reason that you share the lesson that, hey, you need to, as a nonprofit, understand donor needs. You need to empathize with them. You need to pay attention to their needs. The reason is because if you don't, you're going to have this disconnect where you're going to get the first gift and it's going to go away. It's going to be a one-time transaction.
Right.
You're not going to connect. So the promise of your business and why you're sharing the lesson, the promise first is, you as a nonprofit want to build lifelong, sustainable, growing relationships with donors. That's the promise. You don't want to be in that position of feeling like, they come and go. We get quid pro quo donations because somebody puts them on a list and they donate once. And why do they come and go away? That's what the development director and the executive director at the nonprofit is feeling. And you know that because you've dug into that. And so then you understand the promise. That's the first part of the story. The lesson is, well, one way to make sure that you do that is to go in and understand their needs so that when you are communicating with them after that first transaction, you're continuing to nurture that relationship. And then what you did is you just knew those because you know your business. You're on TikTok, and anecdote slaps you in the face, and because you know your business, you're able to say, oh, that anecdote is a great hook for
Right.
me to hang my promise and my lesson. And that's what I love, the fact that you told the story, because at the core of what I'm teaching in this master class, you all are getting a 5-minute version of it today, is a framework that I call the PLAN framework, PLAN. And the idea is that every good business story needs a plan. You need to know the promise that you're making to your audience. You need to know the lesson that you're going to share to deliver on that promise. And then you need to have a good anecdote that allows you to hang that promise and that lesson in a way that's entertaining. So if you just wrote the email that said, it's very important that you dig into donor needs and blah, blah, blah,
Yes.
it's another blah, blah, blah info only email. But you write this funny story about, I'm watching on TikTok and you wouldn't believe it, this moron is trying to shove ice cream down the mouth of this
Diabetic.
diabetic, and people are rolling their eyes. And then boom, you connect it back to, it reminds me of some of the nonprofits I see out there. And now all of a sudden you've turned it into a cautionary tale that makes sense to people, and you say, you really need to get over that, and you need to do this if you want to realize the promise. So promise, lesson, anecdote, and then there's always a next step. There's
Next
always
step.
a next
Gotcha.
step.
Hmm.
And next step, contact me, sign up for
Right. The call
this
to
for
action.
more
What's the next step?
information,
Hmm.
the call to action. And those four elements are always part of a good, even a short post in social media. But emails, articles, blog posts, videos, if you think about those four things: promise, lesson, anecdote that gives you the
And
framework
so
of the
what's the
story.
anecdote that I could use to share the lesson that I want to share, right? Like
Right.
what is that? Um I'm just thinking about like some of my client stories. They want to make a case. They're really invested in telling people how awesome they are.
Hmm.
And I'm like, no, you want to tell people how awesome they are, not you,
Right.
right? Right? Like how
Right.
awesome they are.
Yeah.
My colleague of mine, Amy Fazio, she taught me this line: people come for the cause, but they stay for the community.
Hmm.
Right. And those stories, that's what's creating community, right?
Right.
Because I see myself, that's all I have to do is like when people feel seen and heard. Yeah, the second date update, it's a trip. I am telling you, it is
Yeah.
like, oh, and
And
I think,
I'll tell you one more thing. What there are two ways to get to stories, to assemble effective client attracting content. One way is to do what you did. So it all depends. You have to start with understanding the promises and the lessons that you're aiming to deliver. You have to know your business, and
mhm.
that means you have to know your prospects and your audience, and you have to know the lessons that you intend to share. If you don't, sort of like, what are you going to put out there? So you start with the assumption that you've done that work, but then how on a daily or weekly or monthly basis are you generating the content? Way number one is you find anecdotes and you say, this is entertaining and funny and worth sharing, and I'm going to connect it back to the promise and the lesson, which is exactly what you did with that TikTok, the radio show.
Right.
You came across it and you said, this is great, and it clicked. Oh, this could be great content to teach and share the stories I want to share. The other way is you start by saying, I want to create an email or a blog post that is about this promise and this lesson. And the story I told a moment ago about the executive coach, where we said, you know what, let's create a better piece of content about delegation. Let's really create a post that is not so blah 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 boring. You are selling delegation. You want people to understand the power of delegation. How are we going to do it? And then we had a conversation where we went in search of
An
the
antidote.
anecdote.
So it's
Yes.
either you find the antidote and attach it to a lesson, or you have a lesson, something you want to share, like, okay, what is an antidote around us that we could use to share this?
Yeah, and you could
Um,
draw from slice of life. You could draw from
right.
literature, from television, from movies. You could ask Chat GPT for tips on that.
Sure.
I don't want Chat GPT to be my ghostwriter, but I don't mind asking Chat GPT for a story idea.
Yeah, and it could just stimulate your thinking to your own, right, to your own stories. Like, oh,
Right.
right, I never even thought about that could work. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, so one of my clients is the Sisters of Saint Joseph of Carondelet, and they are amazing, and they're doing this thing at the Mother House. It's beer and bites, and it's like, and one of the sisters playing the accordion and this polka band, like it's all the thing. And but and what we're working on is there's so many stories like in this event, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
about connecting to the humanity of the sisters. We tend to idolize, I one of the sisters in this, she was my daughter's foster mom, and we got
Mm-hmm.
to be really good friends. And I would tell her these stories. I'm like, oh my God, I totally forgot that you're like religious. And she's like, honey, I'm a person with a religious job. It's fine. you know,
Yeah.
but like, we would, like, so I'm just thinking about all the stories in there. It's not like we had this event and this and this and this happened,
Yeah.
right? It's like all the anecdotes and relating the anecdotes to the bigger picture and
Yeah.
the lesson, like the bigger picture that you want to share. And my biggest thing, and I know this is true for you, is really the authenticity, transparency, honesty. That's what people are craving.
Yep.
The more
Yep.
authentic, honest, and open you can be, the more people will be drawn to you.
Yep. Yep. I said earlier that it's not all about you. And one of the great mistakes that some of the so-called storytelling gurus or coaches make is they want to emphasize first and sometimes solely on, let's develop your origin story. And having a good origin story is important, kind of, for brand building, and if you have a stage presentation that you do, sort of weaving in a story about yourself, and origin story can be important. But the tendency of people who are in search of an origin story is to just, again, do the whole me thing, and I've got to tell you about the garage where I invented the widget, and so on and so forth. And that's not at all what you should be doing. The spotlight should be back on the prospect. So I made that point earlier. However, and you should be starring in your stories. So when I tell a story about going fishing with my son, and and the fact that he caught 37 fish and I caught 2, and then I throw in a line in the email, yes, I said 2, as in I'll have 2 scoops of ice cream with my humble pie. I am being authentic and having fun, and I'm a character in the story. But when I tie that anecdote back to promise and lesson, the promise of the story is, or there's another detail of the anecdote to share. I asked him how he does it. How do you do it? How do you catch 37 fish when I catch 2? And he kind of rolled his eyes and he looked at me. He said, Dad, I put my fly on the water. And I was like, well, what do you mean you put your fly on the water? And then I realized that while I'm busy tying on a new fly or staring at the clouds or thinking about, this or that, he's just out there and he's all action. And his
Mm,
fly is on the water all day long. And it was a metaphor for, so many of the people I work with feel stuck, and they're saying, why isn't my marketing working? Why isn't, why aren't I getting more people to my website? Or why that feeling of confusion and doubt and frustration, and it doesn't work, I wish it worked. Those are all the journeys that I understand from empathizing and envisioning with my clients, the emotional pain. And part of the lesson to overcome that, or to get from, I'm stuck to I'm unstuck, is, hey, just focus on doing stuff, focus on putting stuff out there, get your fly on the water. And so it was a
right.
metaphor for a really important lesson, but it's a boring story about a dad and his son that's nice to share with the family over a holiday meal, until and unless I tie it back to, hey, this speaks to the very thing that you're struggling with or aspiring to in your business. So that was an example of personal anecdote. I thought it was interesting and fun. I realized that there was a connection to a lesson and an idea and a promise that I want to bring to my audience. And so I told the story. And the fact that it's a first person story about me and my children, people get to know me better, know, like, and trust me better. It's authentic. GPT can't write that email,
Right.
not even close.
And
And especially if you're in the consulting business or professional services business or whatever the case may be, where you're looking for clients to choose you to work together,
right.
you have to stand out. And you do that when people know, like, and trust you, when they like you and your personality. And this kind of storytelling and content creation
And
is
I
what
think
does it.
that's a universal thing though. I mean, because one of the things I'm working with clients on is to be more personal, like not have an email from an organization to a person, but have an email from a person to a person.
Amen.
Right. Hey,
Yeah.
this is, hey, this is Marianne, and that they're getting to know. And you're right. In the past, I was saying would say, oh, you don't want to put the leader out front. That's not about them, it's about the clients. But as long as that, this is what I'm hearing you say, that leader is connecting it to the clients,
Yeah.
right? You're building two levels of trust. You're building like empathy with those you serve, but also connection to the
Right.
people inside the organization. And I think a lot of folks are, I want to say, hesitant to, kind of there. I think there's some people who are more inclined to do it, and that comes easier than others. But when I see organizations, and there's a guy in Chicago, and this organization is called the Block, BLOC, and he is brilliant at this. He's the founder and director, but he definitely puts himself in a narrative, but he's doing it because he's advocating so hard for the kids in the community that he serves.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And he tells incredibly transparent and open stories about what's happening inside the organization,
Right.
and, in service to others. Right. And
Right.
so I feel like it's not just, oh, because I want to talk about my kids. It's because I'm talking about my kids because it's a lesson that I want other people to know. Just like when I was talking about like kids going off to college, like
Yep.
maybe, right, and or some there's, oh, my kid is often, and and the pain, and that reminds me of this kind of pain that we see in our organization,
Yeah.
or kids, or maybe there's parents, like I have, my daughter has a disability, she will never go to college. There's,
Yeah.
like I could, if I was working in organizations, because like you you might be feeling the same way, that there's a pain of like your kid not being able to do typical things.
Yep.
And the other side of that is my daughters did high school, they do prom at school, like having her do a typical thing like that. If I was the ED of an organization, that served kids or teens or adults with disabilities, I'd be like, isn't it cool? Because we know how rare that is, right? So I'm telling a story, but I'm connecting it to something that they care about, that they want to change. And isn't it wonderful? And because of you, kids get to have these stories, right? Or something like that. And that's what
Exactly.
you wanted to do, because really, don't be afraid to step out into and share your truth, because
Yep.
that's what people connect to. That's what they
That is
want
what people connect to.
in this
It
chat GPT world, man. They just
it
want to know you're a real person.
it is about standing out as a human being in this robotic world. You're 100% right. And I'll offer a little tip for those who are uncomfortable. I don't want to tell my story. I don't want to talk about my children. A great place to start is, maybe you talk about something else. So in the case of you and the TikTok videos and so forth, the email can be, I have fallen in love with this show. I love getting on TikTok and watching these videos. I think they're a hoot. And then you are essentially just telling what you saw, connecting it back to the lesson. But that little bit alone, I really have been enjoying, and I think that's funny. I will do this also for, I'll give you an example. One of my favorite movies, Groundhog Day. So there's a scene in Groundhog Day, multiple repeats of this scene, if you know
Yes.
the movie, where an insurance salesman named Ned Ryerson
Yep.
sees uh, Bruce Connors, is that his name? The Bill Murray character, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Phil Connors. Phil, hey, it's Ned Ryerson. And he begins to pitch him single life insurance, single blah, blah, blah life insurance. And I have just the ticket for you. And it happens 2 or 3 or 4 times, and Groundhog Day keeps happening over and over again. And after the umpteenth time, Phil Connors, played by Bill Murray, is waiting for Ned, the pesky insurance salesman, and just cold cocks him in the jaw, and the whole theater goes crazy and applauds. And everybody, as I write in the email, everybody wants to rear back and slug a Ned. And then I tie it to the promise and the lesson which is that you never should assume that you have just the ticket for somebody until you get to know them and know what it is that they need and want. Okay. So
Yep.
business lesson, right? But I deliver it in a way where I'm evoking a movie. And all I say at the beginning in terms of my own stuff is, one of my favorite movies is Groundhog Day, and I saw it recently. I was flipping through the TV, and I can't help myself. Every time I land on a channel where it's playing, I'll stop and I'll watch it. I'll just put down whatever I'm doing. I'll stop and I'll watch it, and then I tell the story from the movie. So I haven't revealed a bunch of deep secrets about myself, but I put myself in with first person and just a little detail. And those people were like, yeah, I love Groundhog Day too.
Right.
They've just made a connection with me, and they know me just a little bit,
Right. It's like
a
it's
little
just a
more.
movie or a TV show. It's nothing really personal, but
Exactly.
but it's an anecdote that's coming from you. So it's not like you have
Exactly.
to because I'll tell everybody anything. I don't care. But I I know that's not everybody's thing.
Yep.
I love that. That's a great tip. And it's also a reminder, like transparency, it's like baby, just one step at a time. Like
Exactly.
one little thing. All right. So we could go on, but I'm gonna this is amazing. Thank you so much. I love so many I'll never forget plan. So thank you for that. I'm
Yeah,
already
you're welcome.
integrating that, and I hope everyone else is. I have one quick final question, which is how I end the show. Now you and I live in the same city, so this could happen. If we ever wound up at a karaoke bar together, what is your go-to song and
Oh
why?
man. Wow. I think you told me that you were going to ask me this question, um, so I am a big fan of a guy named Todd Rundgren, who was really popular in
Hmm.
the 70s and 80s, and wrote a great song called "Hello, It's Me." That might be the karaoke song that I would do, and I doubt this is on any karaoke machines, but there's a song that Todd Rundgren wrote called "Just One Victory," which I really, 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 really love. In fact, I have a book coming out soon, and I quote that song in the opening pages of the book as a go-to song that I would sing to myself in my room when I need a little pick me up. And so
Okay, all right.
if I ever found that on a karaoke machine, that would be
It's
my
it's
go-to
all
song.
digital now. They can pull down whatever you
I
want.
can pull whatever I want. All right.
Awesome.
All
We'll
right.
have to
Well,
track
it's a
it.
date. We'll go do karaoke and I'll
It's
sing Just One Victory.
awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna have to listen to that song too. I'm excited. All right. Thank you so much for this. This has been wonderful. And how can people get a hold of you?
So the place to go is to storypowermarketing.com. That's all one word, no dashes, storypowermarketing.com. And when you get there, you'll be asked if you want to join my email list. And I practice what I preach, and you'll learn a whole lot about how to do the
Yeah.
story powered content thing just by
Yeah,
reading
you
my
do. You
emails.
you eat your own cooking. I would get on.
Right.
I'm on your email list. I would get on the email list just so you can see the model, right, and really start to learn the model of what he's talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, and we'll have the notes. We'll have your links to your Twitter and your LinkedIn, in the show notes. And thank you so much, Tom, for being here.
Marianne, thank you. Really had a blast.
All right, and that's it for me and the influential nonprofit. If I am putting together a 3-day up level your influence intensive in October. It's a little bit different. I typically do a 6-week course, but I'm trying this 3-day thing. So what's going to happen? So my promise, right? is, if you want to be more productive, feel more confident, be able to easily ask for what you want, not feel so alone, build a community of sustainable support. That's what I teach people to do. And if you're interested, in the show notes, there's a little quickie intro call. If you want to talk to me about it, that's great. I'm happy to, see where you're at and see what I'm doing and see if there's some alignment. And if not, that's okay too. It's always nice to meet people in my community. All right, that's it for me and this episode of the Influential Nonprofit.